Hi everyone, welcome to the Land Down Under Hangout. Tonight's book is A Master of Djinn by Djeli Clark. Mel's got the alternate cover.
Yes, and I'm recording in Brady Bunch for you tonight, so everybody can see it.
Very nice. So this is I suppose it's technically a murder mystery set in alternate history Cairo in 1912. So it's fantasy, it's alternate history, it's mystery. So I'll just check in with everyone as to what your general thoughts were. Bobby, you want to kick us off?
I quite enjoyed it quite a lot. There were a couple of aspects to just the whole story, like vibe that I didn't like so much, but on the whole, I really enjoyed it. I did like the novella with Tramcar of 015. I liked that one better, but I think that's because the bits that were in this book that that didn't gel with me, that I didn't like, that I had a very strong response to, weren't in that one. But otherwise, I really liked it. It was very fun. It was a bit like kind of reading what Studio Ghibli might be if it was set in Cairo. Like it had that sort of just fun bit of a feel to it, even though it was a murder mystery. So a bit like, I guess, The Mummy in a way too. That's a lot like same vibe as The Mummy.
So just to actually back up for some additional context that I should have given, this is not the first story set in this world with these characters. There have been a couple of short stories set in the world, a couple involving the protagonists already, a couple involving other characters. So just some context there. Mel, you want to go next?
Yeah, I had a great time reading this one. I enjoyed a lot of aspects of it. I gave it 5 stars initially. I'll probably back it down to 4 because I usually have my initial, whoa, that was a great time. And then, I calm down a little bit. So, but that's still a highly recommended book from me. So had a good time.
Sarah?
Hi, sorry, it's storming here, so I'm trying to reduce any noise by keeping myself on mute. So I enjoyed this. I felt it started strongly and then just sort of kept falling away. So it's like the last 2 hours, I found it a real struggle to get through. And it felt a bit like, and I remember thinking this, I was like going, it just felt like boss fight after boss fight, like a video games metaphor. And I just was kind of like, I'm kind of done, guys. I'm kind of done. And we'll get into some of the narrative structure, I'm sure, soon. But I thought the world building was really good. And what I think is, I always love this type of stuff where the author has already kind of built the world. So without having to explain everything through the prose, through the writing, it just feels fully formed. And that was really great. I think that's why I had such a good time at the beginning. So I thought the world building was mwah. But yeah, just as it went on, it kind of, yeah. That's me. Elizabeth, back to you.
I mostly enjoyed it. As with Bobby, there are a few aspects to it that I was a bit disappointed with, but then there were other aspects of it that I really enjoyed. So it all comes out as wash in the end, I think. So I've read 2 of the other stories in this world, and I was curious as to if this was everyone's first time in this world.
Yes.
Yours, Sarah, and yours, Mel?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was wondering if you found it because I found myself wondering if it relied a little too heavily on having read the previous stories, especially the first one. You didn't feel like you were missing any context or anything?
No, my only qualm, I think, about knowing, because I knew there were other stories that I hadn't read, and it was quite clear even from reading it that there really had been other stories. I think my only qualm was I thought it was slightly lazy to be using the exact same device at the end point of the story. I was sort of like, you couldn't come up with something else that they could be making use of. That was about it. But I did think to myself, maybe if I'd read that story, that would actually be not as good. But I enjoyed it well enough regardless that because I hadn't read that story that I was like, oh, whatever, and just let it go sort of thing. But I did think that if I had read the other story that perhaps I wouldn't be quite so blasé about that particular plot point.
I actually think the fact that there are stories already written in this world meant that this author knew this world well enough that it just kind of came through. Like they've spent so long in it, they've worked out a lot of the magic systems, they've worked out a lot of how the rules of the world work. So I didn't feel like, I feel like sometimes when you're going through those short stories of someone working that, you're going through exactly that, of going, well, what rule is there, what rule isn't? Whereas in this, I felt, okay, this is fully formed, fleshed. They know where everything is. Like that's very, like I thought map wise, it was like really good, bang on. Like you knew where things were, where you were traveling. Distances made sense. These are all things that I think shouldn't be underestimated in helping someone feel, set in that time and space. I as I said, I haven't read the others. I was quite interested. I think the characters of the angels were so they're so kind of mysterious in what their goals are, that I was like, oh, maybe you do get to know them a bit more in the other story. That was probably the only reason I was interested, is to kind of see a bit more about them. The clock. Someone tell me what it's called again. Clockwork. I can't want to call it a clockwork.
The Clock of Worlds.
The Clock of Worlds. Not the Clockwork Orange. Segments being put together. The Clock of Worlds. It was hinted at, right? Like you're kind of like, well, they're not going to talk this much about it if it's not going to turn up at the end. And that was, but it's interesting, Mel, because that you found it so exciting, because I felt like it was this thing that that was the bit of the world building that fell down. Like it was like, I felt like we're going to tell you about it, but it's going to be a bit like a dream where if you look directly at it, you don't really see all the bits, but that's kind of how it felt to me, where I just couldn't, as I'm wanting to understand, well, what does it look like and how does it set and which pieces go where, but that never got explained. And maybe it wasn't important really, but
I was just so engaged with the action of what was going on that I just didn't actually think about it or care that much.
Yeah, whereas I don't know, I'm really into kind of like I don't know. My favorite part of Indiana Jones is the bit with the book and they're talking about, I love that bit when they're talking about the ark and they look, I just love that. So yeah.
I had two things there. First thing, if you're new here, we're going to spoil the hell out of this book, so be warned.
So spoiled.
So spoiled already. The second part is that the Clock of Worlds plays an important part in the original first story. So I feel like it's what you're looking for, Sarah, is probably covered in that story. So maybe
and that's what I kind of meant. Like it wasn't, and maybe to Mel, she wasn't so bothered by that, whereas I was kind of like, I need a little more detail. Like,
see, I'm not a visual person. I find it very difficult to picture things in stories. Like I don't picture what characters look like even when they've been described. I don't visualize things. I feel things and I experience moments that are happening and like movement and things like that, but I just don't seem to picture things. So for me, I was just like, gears, that's fine.
Whereas for me, I was like, this author spends so much time describing each Djinn and their size and what their skin is like and the horns and what their voices were like, so there was so much time, which is great. But so when we got to it's like the Clock of Worlds, and I was like, okay, so like, do you know where we're up to? Like which bits are how many bits? Like it's just like little bits like that. So yeah, that was the only bit which did seem to rely on the first story, but it wasn't really necessary, because I think at that point the author just wants to get the vortex ripped open, right? That's the main aim of that. So I got it.
Actually, I'm sorry to pull back just a little bit to what you were originally saying, Sarah, too, about like the fact that not everything was like in detail explained because it was already established. That's kind of one of the things I liked, because sometimes I get so tired of the bog down that a new author will do with a new world where they're explaining everything. And it's brilliant world building, but it's like, get on with the story.
I think it's a case of, and I think it's a case of show, don't tell, whereas what I experienced in the world building of this was a lot of show of the world rather than tell of the world. So I got to understand the world through the characters and the interactions and different, and why can the police force do this and not do this? So that was kind of where I was going with that.
Yeah. I do have a question later though, because that for those who have read the other stories, that I want to ask. I've got it marked down though, so don't worry, I'll come back to it later.
Okay, well, Bobby, you mentioned you had some reservations about it. Did you want to unpack some of those for us?
So the first thing, and actually, Sarah, this is very interesting listening to you talk about how you liked the last 2 hours. For me, I did not bond with this book until we got to the point where we met Abby and her brother. There were teeny tiny bits of the storyline that I enjoyed up until that point. Like I liked Siti and Fatima together. I liked the back and forth between like Fatima having to kind of go, what? I have someone, I'm a loner. Like I liked that whole thing with getting like saddled with a new partner and stuff. But not until we met the heiress whose father was a horrible person. But the reason why was because everything leading up to that was this like proselytizing, hyper religious setup that they were doing that really I do not like. I have a big problem with things that remind me of born again Christian like pulpit proselytizing stuff. That is a real like push point for me. And I was listening to the audiobook, which meant that I had a firebrand preacher in my ear every time we had those little moments into those like there was the what was it? The first time you meet Al-Jahiz, right? And they're kind of infiltrating into what was effectively a religious ceremony or religious gathering. And I did not like it. Like as soon as that happened, my brain checked out and then I didn't want to go back to the book for a while. So I actually had to do this book in 3 different goes, begging the library to give it back to me because everyone else wants to read this book. But it's like once we got to that point. So that was one of the big things is I had a problem with that like big religious because one, it reminded me of that whole born again Christian thing that was a bit that I had to kind of deal with growing up. So it's a push point, but also it seemed very easy. Like if you remember in Indiana Jones and in The Mummy, all the local natives, if you will, are these total, like they don't have brains, they're this big mass that just kind of bow down to whatever god they're looking at and they don't think. And I didn't like that. It rubbed me a bit wrong. That like I just didn't like it. So there was that. And then the other bit was there was kind of 2 things happening here. You had that trying to encourage the poor to rise up and overthrow the government. And then you had a peace conference. And there was a bit of whiplash there for me. It's about 2/3 of the book. And then you have a whole new like focus. And I was like, wait, what? I don't understand. So there were those 2 things that really kind of grated on me the most when it came to the book itself and the arc of the book.
Yeah. I'm totally with you about the whole, this is a world where magic exists and yet the people somehow aren't critical thinkers. Yeah, I totally with you on that point. And that's, I think that's where it started to go. And then what was this other peace conference? Yeah, I remember thinking, where are we going? People I remember that. So
I actually thought that I had bookmarked where I ended where I had left off, like that something had happened with the audiobook player that I had, because that right around there was when I had like been waiting for the book to come back from the library on Libby, and it turned up and then it picked up and it started a new chapter and I was like, wait, what? Did I miss something? And had to go back and check, and it just kind of feels like you get dropped with this new thing. So
interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, those were my 2 gripes.
Did you forget that there was sort of the build up to the peace conference happening?
I think it might have been so subtle or overshadowed for me with the other stuff going on that, I guess it did. It didn't feel like it was wrapped up either. It just sort of happened. We had a little bit of what was going on, but we didn't.
I felt like that was
time with something that did not feel like it actually affected the complete end of the book. Because he changed his focus. He spent 2/3 of the book talking with all of this stuff with this uprising, and then we have a peace conference where they're not actually connected, and at the same time, like the main thread is Abby and Al-Jahiz. That's your main thread, right? But yet Abby doesn't come in until a bit later anyway, and then like Abby herself, okay, fine, but then like. Yeah, it felt too disjointed. Those 2 things, the fact that one, like this over here that we started with actually didn't get wrapped up at the end for me. And then also we have this peace conference, which sort of got wrapped up, but we didn't get enough of it, like because of where it came in the book.
To me, it all connected really well, because I was sort of like, the whole point of the peace, the connections with the peace conferences, she was using that so that she could build up her wealth through selling arms. And so she was using the peace conference to help trigger the war. And she was basically like that. I mean, I predicted it pretty early on, actually, that that's where this was going, and that was kind of the whole point, was that she, well, actually, I didn't know it was her at the time. At the time, it was sort of
interesting.
I figured it was one of the two siblings.
It was one of them.
I figured out right from the beginning.
Because I was like, it's one of you, and it could be the sister, but I'm really
well. The only reason I didn't think it was Alexander was because he they were constantly suspicious of him, and that's obviously like it's never going to be him sort of thing. So I figured it out, and then like the whole thing was is that, so you remember how like the whole part where Fatma, she was seeing the how do you say her name, by the way?
Fatma.
Yeah, Fatma. Yeah.
Where she was the one who had, like, she saw the illusion, and so she was getting the illusion of what the man in the gold mask looked like, and it was projecting that to everybody else. Remember that part?
Mm-hmm.
That all came from her first meeting with Abby at the very beginning, when Abby fainted and implanted the picture of what this person would look like in her head. And I thought that was a fascinating like line through the whole thing. And so to me, like,
I enjoyed that, but it was I saw that. I mean, sorry, carry on.
I think it's more that they didn't feel balanced, and they didn't feel like they necessarily locked in together. It felt like two volumes in one big story, in a way, I guess. And that he probably, like, so maybe for me it would have been split them up into 2 books, and you get the first book, which is all of this, and then the second book is this, like, or the second movement. It didn't feel like it wasn't clearly defined enough, and it just didn't work for me, I guess.
I had no problems with it. I thought it was quite balanced, and I could see how the two were affecting each other, especially because the war aspect, and in particular, because it's kind of 2 wars in some respects. It's sort of a civil versus the World War, that they were hinting, like they were linking it obviously to the World War in terms of what they were building up to. And I think that's why I wasn't looking for a resolution around that, because I knew that this was part of a much bigger picture than what they were dealing with. And it was just the Abigail and the arms sale that was the link to that part of it, and so I wasn't looking for any further resolution beyond that inside of that element of the story, for me anyway.
What did you think, Elizabeth?
I didn't notice any disconnect between the two, but kind of, now that you mention it, it is like a bit strange, but only in that sense that like there is big class discrepancy, like of course, like the concerns of like the poor and the commoners don't really kind of impact much on the global power makers in some respects. It would have been nice to see a little more of that come through. But like, I didn't have a problem with the trajectory of the story. But Sarah, I think you were saying that you picked the mastermind pretty early on.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's just, the murder mystery type thing in me. But yeah, like, and it was there. It was there in the. It's sleight of hand. The whole thing's about magic, right? So it's a sleight of hand. And I was always from the beginning thinking, what is the illusion that is happening here? What are we being told we're seeing, but we're not? So, it's theme, which is done beautifully. And that's not like not every reader is going to pick up on that, just because I'm kind of not because I'm amazing, but just because I'm kind of heightened to theme and looking for seeing how different authors or different auteurs are trying to work with that within their own creative arts. And so I was looking at the theme. I was like, okay, this is where it is. And then, and in fairness, Abby's sleight of hand, her illusion of what she was portraying as far as one type of of person to the other type of person was very clever, right on theme, right on brand. But I think the thing that I just sat there going was the AW part. And I was like, oh, come on. And also, like, you're women, you're jumping to biases yourselves. And I'm not even I can't even remember if that actually got, like, whether she called herself out on that, whether Hadia and Fatima called themselves out to say, oh, wow, we just didn't even, like, we just assumed an AW must be a man, as opposed to, a female mastermind on that.
I actually thought that was less sex and more cultural. That because when she first interviews Abigail, it was all like, oh, of course, stupid white woman can't speak our language and things like that, but thinks she can and is trying. And they just all bought it all because
which is sleight of hand, right? That it's all an illusion she's putting on. Yeah. It's
Which personally, like, looking back on it, I was like, oh my God, it was so hammed up, seriously. But
yeah.
You, Sarah, I found that, like, quite predictable and picked it pretty much straight away, like, from
well done.
Chapter 2 sort of thing. Yeah. So I was a little bit frustrated that it took so long for the characters to get it, although I was glad that they actually did get it in the end and they didn't have to wait for her to reveal herself, sort of thing, like it was me all along or whatever. But
it's like Scooby-Doo is like, oh, of course it is, you're the only person we've met that isn't in the show on a regular basis.
But it and it was the theme as well that gave it away for me, because it was about, like, women being overlooked, like Hadia, for example. Like Fatma's introduction to Hadia was like just encapsulated perfectly, like, that theme, because it gave Fatma a chance to show her flaws and that she had already, like, overlooked things there. And so it wasn't like, it was very obvious that she'd just do it again, because one thing that was really good about this book was the use of reincorporation. So, like, those themes keep coming up, and the Merid in the second chapter comes in towards the end to break the spell about the seal of Solomon.
Solomon,
yeah. So I really liked that in that respect, and to see, like, the angels again to come back. Although I did notice that, like, the issue with the agenda of the angels wasn't resolved. So I kind of hope that we do see more in this world, because there's obviously some more material there.
Yeah. In fact, I wrote down on further reading, anything by this author.
But I was wondering, do you think that, like, Mel, you thought it was more a cultural thing, but I was wondering, like, is it like the bias of the author coming through, that the women would not suspect another woman?
That's actually something I was sort of wondering, because I did think that he did actually a pretty good job of writing a story that didn't, like, I considering it's a guy writing this, right? Like, he did a really good job, I think, with women in general. I have a point
with that. The main female character is Butch.
Yeah, which I kind of liked as well.
No, I loved it, but I think that's why he had an easier time with writing her. And he got away with more. And in fact, she behaves, and she doesn't realize it. And you would assume as a reader that she wouldn't do this because she's female and she identifies as female, but she dresses like a man. She behaves like a man. She doesn't want she doesn't want a partner. And she especially doesn't want a female partner, to the point that she is completely blown away whenever her partner turns out to be a total ninja. Like, she could not comprehend in her head that a female could do that. She never picks up on the fact that she is biased herself. but I think the reason why he does such a good job is because it's a man writing a woman who has male characteristics, who's coded as male in the book.
But she's still a dandy. She's
I know. I'm not saying,
close.
I love her character. I'm just saying, I think the reason why he was better at it than, let's say, Andy Weir is because he was writing a male-coded female character.
Saying yes, and maybe that's where you got to figure out your strengths, right? Like, start small, work it out. But I actually think Hadia was fantastically, I think there's more to see. There's so much more to explore.
Yeah, there is. Whether he can do it well is a whole other story.
Well, exactly. But he's starting that, starting to set some really good foundations there. And there was somebody else. And City is a really interesting character. I mean, she's a femme fatale. So...
Again, very male-coded, strong, character.
But see, I thought what I liked about it in terms of how he wrote the women was that I could see anybody in the role. Like, that was the thing that I liked about it. I saw it as a bit more gender neutral rather than in how he wrote. And I kind of liked that, because I was sort of like, I don't feel like I'm worrying so much about whether this is all of these female things and stuff like that. I liked that element of it. And even those times where, yes, you could sort of say, oh, she didn't sort of immediately, she was, a bit against having a partner and things along those lines. It got flipped pretty quick though. Once she sort of realized that she was doing things that were wrong, she didn't continue to resist. She would oh, you're right, I should fix myself up about it. Actually, this is a really good thing. And so I just saw that as more of a response to, I've been solo and doing this by myself for so long, I wasn't really looking for someone to help me out.
I love that scene.
Anyone else having to work with anyone else as a liability, because she had to fight so hard to be given any kind of...
and forgetting that actually, all tides, lift up all boats. I don't know what the saying is, and that to be an ally is going to be the best, more, that's the best way.
Yeah.
And people do need to be reminded of that. People Jane Campion was a fucking bitch this week, women do need to get smacked down about this stuff.
Yeah, so, and that's what I liked about it. But the fact that when she got pulled in, she went, oh yeah, you're right. And then she flipped and she was right with that. And I liked that element of Fatma as a character, that she'd been strong enough, she'd been doing all of this. Maybe some of the reasons why she had been getting away with that was because she was a bit more on that masculine side and things along those lines. But in the end, she was still a female supporter. She wanted to support women, and I really thought that was a good element that he'd brought to the character as a woman.
A couple of thoughts from me. One is that I love that we have James Bond as a woman of color. That's just what I like about Fatma the most. And the other was I appreciated that that Fatma and did accept Hadia so quickly, because I really hate the female rivalry or competition when
yeah, absolutely. And I was also really pleased because I'm like, I know conflict is a big part of most stories, but I was really glad that this wasn't what it got resolved. And the detectives, right? So I always think about one of my favorite detective movies. Mel, you can never watch this. Seven, David Fincher, and that's right. But that's two detectives, right? And the old guy not needing the young guy, and the young guy desperate to learn, and then getting over that conflict pretty early when they realize that they can both bring something to the case. And actually one of the things I really love about that is also it's there, but it's whilst the other conflict is growing, and then it kind of flows out. So I was also really pleased that they didn't we didn't spend ages with a frickin' infight, because I hate that. I don't know if anyone here is a Ted Lasso fan, but I frickin' love how the women in Ted Lasso are basically supportive of one another, and that's been a big thing, which is there's not that internal conflict, and it turns out it's just women discovering that they have more in common than they realize and just roasting each other. Anyway,
And
shout out for Ted Lasso.
The other aspect of that I liked too was that even after Fatma had sort of had it, slapped out of her, she still was protective of Hadiat, so that when they went to unmask the gold-faced man, she sort of tricked her so that she'd stay behind. And it was like, well, yeah, because it didn't just immediately get all completely fixed. And she had to have another moment of, oh yeah, that's right, I'm sorry, I should have really been smarter about this. And then it sort of got better after that point. So it wasn't so simple as just one time. I really just thought he did very well with that bit.
I like too that Hadia provides a nice foil for Fatma in like being what we would consider like a more traditionally feminine badass.
Yes.
And also
oh my god, I literally wrote a note. Page 198. Okay, so Hadia is a badass, a serious one. What a move.
Yeah. Sorry, has David got some thoughts he wants to share with us?
He hasn't read the book.
Oh, okay. He's just hanging out. Okay, we're just checking in. And I also thought what I liked about Hadia was she was another foil in terms of her Islamic devotion and how religious she was. And I thought that was another foil for Fatma, who is, obviously having some conflict, and that I also like that. And City too. Well. Yeah. And I thought that was really nice because here's someone who is very like at peace with their relationship with God and the spiritual world, but also kicks ass and is in there fighting for feminism, and I like that.
And is not against other people in their religions. Like she never had any problems with City and what City was worshipping and things like that. So yeah, it was a really good balance from that respect too. I thought it was interesting to sort of see the religious elements of the story where they had these sort of returning religions that it was sort of on the down low and people didn't want to talk about. And I thought it was sort of fascinating too, like the element, like they didn't treat it as this is not real, because if you look at, what's his name? Ahmed. And how he was transforming into Sobek. It was like, yes, this is not just people play acting at this old religion. This is like a real deal thing that's going on here. And I thought that was fascinating that they treated it that way in particular.
Well, when you have Djinn you can really see the Djinn in the world and experience their greatness. Why not have someone who can manifest the god and bring them into themselves?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He was one of my favorite, what did you call it? Regan Corporations? Is that he was actually one of my favorites out of all of them. I was just like,
they managed to play the creepy aspect.
That was hilarious.
And it just made him adorable. It was I don't know how they managed to do that, because it really should have been creepy, but it wasn't. It was adorable.
Cool. All right.
Do you want to talk about City?
Yeah, if you like. Go ahead. Hang on, before we go there, just to
if you have topics, go for it.
No. Like I don't have anything as organized as that. It's just I've got my notes here. But one thing that I had been thinking of was this is a book with a lot of female characters, which is nice. But not only like the protagonists and that sort of thing, but like the incidental characters. Which was nice.
But it also didn't feel like it was all of them either. I thought it was well balanced. It was just a really good number so that you felt like, yeah, wow, there's a lot of women who are really involved in this story. But it wasn't like it was just all women either. So it was nicely done.
Because I quite liked the leader of the 40 Leopards, was it?
Oh my gosh, that character was great.
I forgot about her. She was great.
She was like, she doesn't play a big role, but she's still there being a badass and commanding the thieves and doing a bit of breaking into herself and that sort of thing.
Like a morally grey kind of character who's heart of gold, but it's a Robin Hood type character. Really.
Robin Hood, yeah, exactly what I was going to say.
But you wanted to talk about City, Sarah.
Yeah, I think I haven't read the other books, and I understand, and at least the one with the Clockwork Orange. Sorry, it's going to be for me. I don't know. I didn't get to imagine it. So I'm like, orange with slices going into it. I don't know. So my experience of City was very femme fatale in this, because I had no experience of her, and coming into,
I think that's accurate.
So coming into the, very, I've got to say, very sexy, very hot. Fatma coming home and finding this woman stroking her cat and like helping her with her galloping. Very, very saucy stuff. And just the way she spoke. And I mean, I listened to the audiobook as well, and I thought that the narrator did a good job with the different accents and things. But I really enjoyed that. And it was interesting for me. I'd be interested to know what others think of how by the end of this, she had changed from a femme fatale to a real person with flaws and loves and loss and passions. And I thought it was so often in these type of books, you have basically a trope tile character, and then they never get to become a fully fleshed human being. And what I thought was really interesting about the character of City is she started off, for me at least, I don't know how in the other books, as a femme fatale. She was all mysterious and sexy, and she kind of flitted in and out and knew people, and but her actual who she actually was and what she actually was doing and what she actually felt was kind of hidden. However, Fatma did know she had family who ran what sounded like the most delicious place that I ever want to go and eat in the city. I've got to say, I'm here for the food descriptions, always here for the food descriptions. And that was really, really interesting. But by the end of it, it was like, this is like she's not being, I love this kind of thing. I mean, again, it's a trope, this thing of someone who's being mysterious, and it turns out no, they had just really valid fears of rejection, right? And I actually enjoy that as a narrative journey for characters. And in terms of City, I liked that. How I think about her at the beginning of this is actually quite different from how I think about her at the end, and I wondered how others felt about her. Whereas with Fatma, I kind of like, she's gone through a transformation, but I kind of feel very much the same, like she was the person at the beginning that she was at the end, just with more experience and insight.
I thought that I really liked the fact that they're, at least in their relationship element, not so much their personalities, but in their relationship element, where Fatma just sort of said, I need some space to sort of process what I've discovered about you. But it wasn't sort of done in a way that was, our relationship's truly in danger. It was just more of I need to process this, which I thought was a really good nod to the fact that it was perfectly legitimate for City to keep it secret, given that it was something that not only was she worried about rejection, but also the possibility of danger behind having that sort of thing being revealed, given the circumstances. So it's a totally legitimate reason not to share it, but it's also legitimate for Fatma to feel feelings about this and need to process those before deciding what to do going forward, sort of thing.
Did you feel that Fatma, I don't know, maybe I listened to it, I didn't hear that, but I thought that Fatma was more processing that City hadn't been honest with her, as opposed to that City wasn't. Okay, good. Because I didn't understand that she had a problem with her being a Djinn. It was actually
she had no problem with her being a Djinn.
Yeah,
it was
okay, that's what I wanted to check. Yeah, because that's my understanding. It was that you've lied to me. Can we have a trusting relationship because of that? Yeah, that's how I felt about it.
Yeah, it was definitely about that, but it was also, I felt like it wasn't so much that, I think that Fatma just needed to process and realise that it wasn't her, City keeping it secret wasn't about Fatma. It was about general, and Fatma just needed time to process that information. But the initial reaction was, you kept us really secret from me, and that kind of brings our relationship a bit into question. And it just took a little while for Fatma, and I think that's perfectly legit, to sort of come to the realization of, oh, this actually had nothing to do with me.
Like so many things in humans.
Yes, indeed. But that's why I actually wrote down my favorite quote was actually about that, which was, usually the secrets we keep deep down ain't meant to hurt other people. Not saying they won't hurt, but not through intentions. Those deep secrets we hide away because we're afraid what other people might think.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked that quote because I was like, yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing that's got nothing. Yes, it might hurt you, but it wasn't actually about you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very mature approach to the to the portrayal of the relationship, especially one that has kind of somewhat James Bond and femme fatale vibes. So that was nice to see. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And even though I picked Abigail as the mastermind from the beginning, I did not pick City as a Djinn. That was a surprise.
No.
Yeah, agreed. I knew something was up because of the whole City coming through the windows things. I knew something was up. I was like, that's not normal. Like how... But I thought it must have been something to do with magic or something on those lines. I didn't see.
I thought it might be because the author had sown a few false seeds with Amek/Sobek, right? Yeah. Whereas like it was kind of obvious that the god was inhabiting him and he was allowing that to happen. And I thought, oh, maybe this is something that happens. And I apologize, I do not remember the goddess in the temple that City prescribes to.
Oh my god, I can see the statue, but I can't.
She's with the Temple of Hathor, but she's devoted to Sekhmet.
That's it.
And I thought it might be something similar, whereas the goddess is, and the fact that I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but does Fatma call upon the goddess
at the end?
That's what I thought.
Oh, sorry, no.
When she's changed and she's choking her, she calls on the goddess at that point because she's and that's sort of what helps City pull back at the and regain control.
Yeah.
It would have been nice to see that unpacked a little more, hopefully maybe in next books and whatnot, but why Sekhmet would respond to Fatma's calling, I guess. Because they flagged it as unusual, but they didn't unpack it.
Yeah, I assumed it was something similar, like Sarah said, to what was happening with Ahmed, where he was completely transforming, but perhaps more that the goddess for her was just residing in her somewhat.
No, because it's Fatma that she responded to Fatma's call, not City.
I think
says that.
What we're saying, but if it's just saying this is one of your children, help them, kind of thing. I think that's where my head went, which is.
I thought she was talking to the goddess inside City.
Yeah, gotcha.
But I mean, I'd have to go back and reread it. I might have been reading it wrong. Who knows?
Yeah. Bobby, did you have any thoughts?
No.
Okay. The incidental characters, there are so many good ones. I wondered if we can list some of them, because I love the forensics person. I can't remember the name.
I can't remember her name. Great. I didn't write it down, but like she was another good example of another female character.
Dr. Howard?
Something like that. Yeah. She was great. I loved her so much. I really want a lot more with her.
Yeah, and she kind of didn't. I was a little sad she didn't come back because she was so great. And I had in my head, what's Olivia Octavius from Doc Ock in spoilers in the Spider-Verse movie, Beyond the Spider-Verse or whatever. Anyway, it was just an animation. It's fantastic. But I had
Into
that
the Spider-Verse.
Anyway, I had that character in my head, and I was like, it's just forensics, and it was.
I know that movie pretty well. I'm trying to figure out who you're talking about.
The multiverse.
The multiverse.
Animated.
Oh, the animated movie.
The animated one, yeah.
With Miles and he's Spider-Man.
Yes, with Miles. Yeah, with Miles Morales. Yeah.
So which character are you talking about?
Doc Ock.
Doc Ock. Olivia Octavius. I had her in my head.
Yes,
because she's got the dreads and she's got so she has the big dreads and the big glasses, and she's just wild and out there. And I just had her in my head.
Great. That's a great look for her. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, it would be such 100%. A good look for her. Yeah. Anyway, I loved her. And
I also loved Zagros, the librarian, but I have a pet peeve.
I had him down too, librarian.
Yeah, I have a pet peeve. What the hell is it with obstructive librarian or information types in law enforcement buildings? Like, what the fuck is with this trope? Why does this exist all the time?
All right. No, that wasn't the librarian I was thinking of. I was thinking of the librarian. But yes, we should talk about him. Yeah, I don't know. Is that a trope? Or is that something that happens?
It is definitely a trope that it happens all the time, that this person who holds all of the data in a law enforcement building, in this case it was a librarian, often it's someone who's like works in a room and they've got like the files and everything all behind them, and someone comes down and says, I need this file, and they're like, not right now. And I'm just like, what the hell? Your job is literally to give people information so they can solve crimes.
I think it's because they get the story is that they get overlooked and no one talks to them.
Yeah, so, I get why they do it, but it just
basically if they don't get included, but yet they're the linchpin. If they didn't exist, you wouldn't know where the fuck your information was.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that they should have a lot of respect and all of that for what they're doing, but I don't, like, you wouldn't have a job if you're that obstructive all the time.
I presume it's some kind of civil servant thing, and that civil servants just end up in the same, and then they just become toxic. That's my guess of the trope. I'm not saying that people, by the way, I'm not saying that librarians in civil service are toxic. I'm just saying that civil servants generally can become toxic. So maybe that's where it comes from.
I just had moment. That was all.
I meant the librarian that she goes to, the guy who runs the massive bookshop with his wife, because I think of him as a librarian.
Right.
I thought who was desperate to tell her info, which is most librarians, which are like scientists, which is we want to tell you stuff. That is what that's what librarians and scientists are like. We're desperate to tell you everything. We come on the journey.
To be fair, she only got that information because of Zagros in the first place. That's true. Anyway, I love that. I love that incidental character. I thought, and the whole like, she's like, he's not going to tell me. I'm like going, no, that this isn't how it works. No, nobody's going to be like, oh, I have an audience. I'm just going to tell you. No. There's going to be a whole show.
I quite liked his relationship with his wife.
Yes,
that was great.
And I also liked that she thought of him at the end with the angels and actually protected him from further damage. Like, that was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether the angels will actually go through with that, as we discovered they're not.
Yeah, they're very sketchy.
Very sketchy.
Just
which you had said.
As a side note, it's Dr. Hoda is the forensic
Dr. Hoda
expert, who was great. I love that they tried to replace her, and her replacement was just so bad that they went back to her.
Yeah, I love that. And she's like, I need someone to come in here and start working with me. I need a woman.
I'm gonna have someone to hand this over to. The guys are terrible.
Yeah. I love that too. It's very good.
It's pretty funny.
And then so you mentioned Elizabeth, the reincorporation, which I think is a nice way of setting things up. I presume that's an official way of saying you set things up and you come back to them. You set things up, you come back to them.
Yeah.
And I thought there was some nice, like you talked about in the Mareed. I'm sorry, because I had to listen to it. I was trying to remember names, and I can't remember, because also I got really confused between Al-Jahiz and the guy who like came and brought, like, there was two names.
There's a couple of names. Yeah,
I would be like, are they talking about the guy who she's impersonating, or are they talking about the one who did something amazing like just recently? I'm very confused. So confused. Anyway, there was, so the bit from a reincorporation point of view, something that I thought was interesting, but this is where I felt like we got into this whole boss fight, superhero ending aspect. And it was how when they're all buried under rubble, the Kaiser and the Russian, I can't remember the general, thank you, and then the Queen, I don't know
Yes.
the official. So I don't know the
No,
official
she
name.
wasn't queen. She was the
But-
daughter of someone who'd been super important
Yeah,
in
and
that
they all
country.
came in, but that was started feeling very comic. I don't want to say comic book, but yeah, more. I don't know, more. Because comic book isn't really right, but it's more that it's almost more like Saturday morning cartoon feel to it is what I was feeling. That's kind of a better way of describing what that like those two that took that relationship there, and then her coming in like, you know, and then and it kind of, I got a lot of that. I was like boss fight after the boss fight, and then the bit that I was just like, oh gosh, was like, I liked that she said to Ifrit, the not the lords, but the Ifrit, and
The
she said, you know, the pacifist, which I thought was cute. You know, no, you don't have to take me up, but appreciate the lift. And then she like held her badge out, which was cute, but also like, all right, yeah, we're in a Marvel, we're slap bang in the middle of a Marvel movie right now. It's just, I don't know. I just kind of like, I was like, okay, like this is, it's been very, very serious with no comedic moments if you haven't laid anything else. So there was some tonal issues, I think, that where we started to get some funny moments that were welcome, but I think we could have done with a few more earlier. And that was where, from the Regent Corporation point of view, like holding out her badge again, the Kaiser and the general, like there was just little things like that where I was like, it would have been good to have, you know, Marvel movies, why they have been so good is that they do like to have a little, like, it's quite serious in the action bits, but then they do like to kind of make sure it sort of lifts slightly with something. I don't know if others felt that at the end. Sorry.
Like I didn't know, but there was one moment at the end that gave me those Marvel vibes, and that's when everyone is at City's family restaurant having a meal, and it's like Avengers right there.
Yeah.
I
didn't mind that, but yes, it was the Avengers, right? It's them in the
But that's actually kind of one of the things I liked about Fatma as a character, is that she didn't really have any powers. And in fact, a lot of the time throughout this, I felt like how overwhelming it was for her trying to deal with what was going on. Like, she could fight, but she's a Hawkeye character at best. And and so like with all of these magical powers and Djinn and all of these sorts of things going around that she was trying to deal with, I felt very much that vibe of law enforcement trying to deal with a circumstance where they don't have necessarily the equal powers to everybody around that they're trying to control. And so they're using the power of their role, of their that they've been empowered to by this citizenship to get by and do things. And sometimes that just was not enough.
Yeah. I think Hawkeye is even too much for her. I think she's Phil Coulson. She's Phil Coulson.
That's a very
He only got one funny line, and that was his last one.
But like, I personally thought there was a fair bit of comedy the whole way through. Like, oh my god, that's one of the things I laughed at the most.
Yeah, but it was definitely not a comedy. But in those serious, full-on scenes, I felt like we needed some lighter touches when we got to like the Ifrit and she's lifting up and she's talking to the lords, and then she like that was just a little bit like, oh wow, you're going there. Anyway, sorry.
What did you find funny, Mel?
One of my favorite ones was where she was like, oh, and I thought to address the moment that I'm in, I dressed down, but of course I'm wearing this tie and this color shirt.
That was pretty funny. I enjoyed the descriptions of her outfits greatly.
Oh, I enjoyed all of the descriptions of the outfits. That's why I was like asking on one of the things, and luckily Bobby had done a lot of the work for me. I was like, because also when you're listening, I'm not sure how to spell things.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know what I was like, and it was like when they talked about Galabeas, and I was like, I know that word. I don't know how to spell that word, but I know that word. And then I looked, I'm like, oh, I know what a Galabea is, of course.
Because it wasn't originally spelled in like, Roman letters. So yeah, there's like 3 or 4 different spellings at least. But
yeah, that's what I found interesting reading it. It was like some of the different spellings, and I was like, is this historical? Is this because the way we spell it in English is not actually necessarily correct?
It is also regional. It's also regional. You've got different ways of spelling if you live in if you were translating from Egyptian into English as opposed to Syrian into English, but it's a very similar garment all around the Mediterranean and in the Middle East. So anyway, I thought it was, anyway, the garments, I'm here for the fashion, and because it's classical, like it's classic fashion.
It was really
good
fun. It was really fun. I'd watched a lot of like golden era of cinema Cairo movies, so it was nice to be able to kind of see these characters running around, but they were of course in cartoon form, because I really had this overlay of like Studio Ghibli like over top of it, mostly because of the mustaches. And in like Haunting of Tramcar, whatever, he differentiates the cops by their mustaches. Like they're always described first by the mustache. That's how you meet them. It's so right. I always thought of like Studio Ghibli and all of that, because they always have the funky mustaches.
Yeah, I think you're right though. This, and we're talking about Marvel, and I keep thinking about the What If Marvel series. This would be a beautiful work for an animation because of the world and the Djinn and what you look like. It's one of those things that they're probably, they always want to tackle everything in live action, but I just wish more people would tackle things like they did with Arcane with animation, because I think that's the best way to tackle worlds like this and have it feel grounded. And
the color as well, because it describes a lot in color, and that would really come through nicely in an animation.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
Before we go too much further, I just wanted to touch on race and what you guys thought of how that was presented in this book.
Well, I'm going to say something about myself with this, because this is something that I found fascinating about myself, and not in a pretty light. So I went and looked up the author because I was curious as to his background for basing the story in Cairo. And he's from Trinidad and Tobago. He was born technically in New York, then grew up in Trinidad and Tobago, and then went back to America. And so has no real links to Cairo, and was using other people to help him research and do all of that sort of stuff. And it was fascinating for myself, knowing that information, how I disliked that, when there's absolutely no good reason that he couldn't, because white people do it all the time. And so I was sort of like constantly battling with myself. I was just, why are you having this judgment, Melanie? Stop it, you awful person. There's nothing wrong with him doing this. And it's just because he's a black man that you think he has to come from the country that he's writing about. Stop that, you awful person. So I thought that was fascinating about myself, but that's not relevant to your exact question.
No, but it does kind of tie in, because I did, like, okay, I'm going to preface this by saying I know nothing about modern Egyptian history. So, but I felt like there was like a filtering of race through a US lens throughout the book. And I wasn't sure whether that was due to like my ignorant interpretation, or the author's biases, or whether it was like kind of US cultural imperialism on a broader scale.
Can you give me an example?
I can.
Go ahead, Mel.
There was quite a few references to how people were treated based on the color of their skin. I read that as being a Western influence in general, in that I would see that in Asia as well, where even though the people that they're talking about, they're all, like in particular in Japan, they would all be Japanese, they would still see people who had paler skin as being more beautiful, people who had more Western features being more beautiful, and things along those lines, because it would be that that Western influence that informs their judgment calls of what is beauty and what is better and what to aim for and things like that. So that's kind of how I saw this in this circumstance, rather than the US influence, but I'm not sure that that's wrong, or just
so I've been to Egypt, and my feeling is that he did his historical due diligence. The Egyptians had an ongoing war with Nubia to the south. Aswan Dam is now a water border for where the border used to be. And the reason that, and I've forgotten the name of it, but just where oh God, I went and saw it 5 o'clock in the morning and I can't remember, but there's this amazing like statues that they had to actually move up when they flooded the floodplain for the dam. that was there on purpose to basically scare the bejesus out of the Nubians, to say, don't invade our country, don't have a war with us. And a lot of this, like it's so many, is this cultural thing over, oh, we've had fights with you for years, it's land grabs back and forth. And unfortunately, a lot of it is it gets caught up in skin color and this assumption that, well, I've got family from down south and they remember times when they were, and all this kind of stuff. And in, I can't speak to what it might be like in Cairo, because I did not see any Black people in Cairo. I only saw, brown people in Cairo. But that racism was definitely prevalent, to the point that was part of the culture and part of the reasoning of a lot of what the pharaohs did, for instance.
It's a port and trade epicenter, and historically it would have been under the rule of lighter skinned people, whether they were brown versus white versus dark brown, because so before Britain came in and took it over, it was ruled by more of a like what you would consider coffee colored, if you will. And you had all of the African tribes that were in slaves. Even historically, you can go all the way back to whatever you had, upper, middle, and lower kingdoms. That was a thing. But also you have, from that it became very insular. So you could tell people who were city dwellers, they tended to be fairer, even though by a Western standard, they're not as fair as someone from Scandinavia, for example. But because they all intermixed, and you had the tribes, so the Bedouins, that would move with the water sources, because they were tradesmen and they were shepherders. They would move and they would intermingle with all the other communities that they came into contact with, which would keep them to a darker color, which meant when they came in to do their trading, you're not part of this community. And so I would say that for the most part, I didn't feel like it was so much white versus Black racism, like from an American standpoint. More it was just a colonial imperialism on top of what would have already been there.
Yeah, and you're bang on about the Bedouin side of stuff, because there's a very large Bedouin, still active nomadic population within
not allowed. And in fact, the Gawazi. So they're talking about I put up something about this. So there's Gawazi. The Gawazi tribes were actually there. I don't even know if they're still alive anymore. There were 2 women. They were pure-blooded Gawazi, because the Egyptian government stamped out that particular tribal bloodline on purpose.
So the Sinai Peninsula is a big area of nomadic, and it's because also the Egyptian government has not really allowed people to own land or help them figure things out, so they have to be constantly on the move. And it's forms of cultural racism, so I felt this rang true in an alternative history, if that makes sense, because it is set in 1912. It's not set with the Suez Canal, obviously, that hasn't happened yet, and all the other stuff we know, obviously with the world wars, but in the Suez Canal stuff, all the other things we know is happening, even the oil stuff of the 80s, which is affected like what my experience was. And after I went, a place I was in was bombed a couple of months later, so there's still turmoil, and I thought that without getting too heavily into it, he'd done his due diligence, the author had. So I don't know from a case of specifics, but I thought it's pretty good. And it's a really interesting, Mel, because I didn't know that. I knew he was American, essentially, from the author, right? He was born and he now resides in America, but I hadn't really thought anything other than that, because I always think about a New Zealand author who wrote about werewolves in San Francisco. But
we've had that experience.
Been to San Francisco, I was like, she does not know the city at all.
And we've had bad experiences with this sort of thing, but I was like, I don't feel informed enough about the circumstances to make a judgment call as to whether he got it right.
Yeah, well, he certainly got the lay of the land for Cairo, right, where he put things, and he obviously been on Google. I mean, Google Maps must mean the biggest boon for authors now who want to set their,
I've heard them talk
books
about
and
it.
worlds. Yeah, and the understanding that, oh God, help me, where are the pyramids? They're Giza, thank you, is a separate town. It's a completely separate town. And that understanding, like, it's like, I didn't even really realize that. And when I went, it was like, oh, wow, okay. It's not that far away now because it's like motorways and stuff. But in 1912, that would have been a trip. So, anyway.
I feel like, sorry, I was just going to say, I feel like the context you've given definitely makes like City's treatment in particular, like, very clear. So thanks, that was good. Mel?
I'm not, oh, sorry, Mel.
All right, Sarah, if it's context.
I was just going to say, I'm not sure, because when did they say the Djinn were allowed to be amongst the world again? What year was that?
I think it was 1870s.
Okay, which might have, you need great change to, something. What did they say? Great industrial things will spur change or something. There's some saying around it. I did think from a cultural advancement that it was looking a little positive for 1912, but if there's been such a technological revolution, that's what the word I was trying to look for, which essentially the Djinn coming back to the world would have been, that does make sense. So I did kind of allow that in my head.
I figure that he'd taken, a lot of people sort of say, you're writing a fantasy world, why can't things be a little bit more and he had a huge technological revolution in terms so he's taken advantage of it. Speaking of, that ties into what I wanted to ask. So at the end in his what do you call it, acknowledgements,
epilogue, acknowledgements,
his acknowledgements, he calls this book steampunk, but in my opinion this is not steampunk at all, because it is not powered by steam, it's powered by magic. And so is it arcane punk then?
That's cool. We should have a new genre.
Like that term. That's a great term.
I went looking for that term because I was like, there's got to be a term for this, because this is not the first person to do a steampunk-looking world powered by magic. And I was just thinking, well, maybe he just didn't know what to call it or something. But like the author called it steampunk, so does that mean I have to call it steampunk? Because I think it's arcane punk.
No. Fun. Go and Google search this right now. The first 4 images that I get all look like things that could have come out of this book. Like,
arcane punk. I'm going to say that.
Like one of them looks like a gigantic Djinn. Like,
oh yeah, look at that.
Okay, so I'm in the right.
Oh my God, this is a scene from the. Oh no, it's not. But yeah, this is cool. Oh, yeah, totally. Oh look, there's the Clock of Worlds. No, sorry.
You got the name right though. You didn't call it the Clockwork Orange this time.
I didn't. Oh yeah, totally. This is cool.
Anyway, that's basically what I wanted to raise in terms of that one, because I was sort of like, this is. Like, I actually said it tonight. It can't be steampunk if it's not powered by steam, right? And he's like, yeah, no, it can't be steampunk if it's not powered by steam. That's in the word.
That reminds me of the one last point that I wanted to make, and that was there was a severe lack of the building brain in this book. Like it gets mentioned. I would have liked to see more of the building. Of the ministry, like the ministry gets destroyed, obviously.
Oh, right.
But the building has a brain and is kind of sentient, maybe.
Yeah, that was not very clear, like how sentient it was. Or was it just something?
Yeah, was it clear in other books? Was it exploitable?
It's been a little while since I read the
only one I read was one about the tram cart, Haunting of the Tram Cart, and I don't remember it being explained in any set or described in that one.
Yeah, it probably would have been the first story, I imagine.
I'm hopeful that there's going to be more books in the world, so therefore a lot of these little things will get fleshed out a little bit more, because my impression really was that the brain was for running the boilerplate robot-y things. Yeah.
The boilerplate Unix, which I kind of had to I wasn't sure if this is something I just missed. Like I was like, am I missing, like, this is something that was designed back in the time? Like, I actually had to look it up to know.
It took me a while to figure it out because I was so
Yeah.
so stuck on the term eunuch, which I knew was.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
So it took me a little while. It took a few of his descriptions of them for me to finally go, oh, they're robots of some kind. Okay.
Yeah. Because I got the idea of boilerplate being like, they're the same and like a boilerplate design, but the whole eunuch thing, and maybe that's
I just thought that they were like stormtroopers where they had like a mask on or something to make them all look the same. And I didn't really realize that they weren't humans at first.
Yeah, I kept imagining like the CPG robot, like, but gold and brass. Oh, kind of similar to the robots in Return to Oz, which are terrifying. They're all terrifying. It's a terrifying movie.
Oh my God, I was going to say, yeah, that's a terrifying movie. Why
it's a terrifying movie. Because I imagined them all on a wheel. Like, through
I do have something in my head of what they look like, but I don't know where I got it from. Like, it's sort of a cone with the sort of the closing at the top that's curved, so sort of oval looking, but cone, and then they have like these little eyes and mouth, and it's like
it doesn't look like the cover from one of his other books. You're not thinking of that, are you? Because he did.
I haven't read any of the other books, so I
just might have a look.
Just while we're on the topic of his other books, he has a novella called Ring Chat, which is about.
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, that's not a robot.
No, it's not.
It's not. No, it's about the Ku Klux Klan as monsters.
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
Like actual monsters.
Okay.
So,
I'm going to look at it now to see whether or not this is what I've pictured in my head.
It's a little more horror-esque vibe, Mel.
I'm not planning to read it, just to see if the picture is what I was picturing in my head is all.
I really want to, especially.
No, that is not what I was picturing.
Because when you were talking, I was like, that kind of sounds like that, even though I'm very certain that I knew already that Ring Shot was not robots at all.
So yes, if you want to see the author's writing in a US context, that would be a good book to try out.
Huh.
There's two. Also got Black Drum Gods. Yeah, that one's set in New Orleans, which I also really want to read. I'm very curious.
Well, they're quite possibly related to this world, maybe.
What Ring Shot?
No, the Black God's drums and the Black God's drums and the Dead Djinn universe. Maybe.
Oh, are they really the same one?
Not officially, but they could be. It's in the ballpark.
I'm gonna have a look.
I did just see when I googled that. I think I saw a cover for one of his previous. The Haunting of Tramcar something or other.
That's in this universe.
Yeah, and I just saw a cover, or maybe it's a fan art, and I was like, yes, that's how I imagine it. Yes, boom. Yep. Beautifully done.
That one
was really fun. I liked that one.
It's got two male characters that they make an appearance in this book, in A Master of Djinn, and it's kind of. As well as the haunting of the tramcar, it's also about the suffrage movement in Cairo.
Very cool.
It was a good book. I enjoyed it. So do we have any last points before we wrap up? All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Next month we are reading NPCs. I'm not quite sure who that's by.
It's by Drew Hayes.
Drew Hayes. Okay, there you go. So please join us then. Bye.